We will go straight to the fourth panelist, Djoomart Otorbaev. He is a former Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan. After working in various Kyrgyz research institutes, he became a visiting professor at Eindhoven University in the Netherlands. In 2001, he was appointed as a special representative of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic for foreign investments, and at the same time he founded the investment Roundtable. He's going to talk about, the title of his intervention is Finding the Best Governance Model to Reduce Poverty and Protect Human Rights. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I cannot stop myself from saying big words of gratitude to our hosts as well as to Institute for organizing such interesting meeting. And being in such sophisticated group of lawyers, a little bit difficult to speak, but let me a little bit turn the subject and speak about human rights from political, economical point of view. When I start reading about human rights, what dignitaries and important people saying that the most serious violation of human rights is extreme poverty. And the way to fight with extreme poverty is to stimulate economic growth. This is a subject where I devoted last 25 years of my life, so I wanted to make statement about that. But first of all, a little bit refresh discussion a little bit about my region. Central Asia is terra incognita still. Maybe somewhat similar to Iceland, because neither Iceland nor Central Asia never in the weather cost forecast news in BBC or CNN. People don't know what is Central Asia. With that, Central Asia is a big region, 4 million square kilometers, about the same size as European Union, with 70 million people living there. It's between China and Russia, actually, to get your impression about the region. Kyrgyz Republic is 5 countries of the former Soviet Union. Kyrgyz Republic is the only recognized parliamentary democracy, only 5 years old, with human rights, election process, freedom of press, recognized by international community as the highest standard. And when things happened in 2010, I decided to leave my very comfortable and well-paid job in London Bank and go back to Kyrgyzstan to go for villages and towns to campaign and to be able to run the country in democratic environment. I also was always fascinated by the Eurocentric position that democracy is the best way to build healthy economy. But after some time, after my practical work for 4 years, including at the top of the government, I have some correction to this point of view. This is first. The second is that facts. I try to analyze the facts. It's not the first time, but actually the question which I wanted to raise and discuss today, a little bit provocative, especially in such country as Iceland, which obsessed with democratic principles. The question from the big Q is, what is the best political system to build economy and thus to protect human rights, to reduce poverty? Democracy or authoritarianism? So I will try to start with the facts and then to make my own personal observation in order to answer to these questions. Maybe a bit provocative order to stimulate healthy discussion. Only facts. Facts are the stubborn things. In 1990, the absolute number of people live in extremely poverty then it was about $1 per day, was 1.9 billion. Last year, the poverty line then was $1.25, reduced to 700 million, almost threefold, significantly. Only about 10% of those reductions came from so-called democratic countries. China alone has lifted more than half of its population, or over 700 million people, out of poverty since 1979. Another fact, Singapore, which has been ruled as de facto one-party state since '65, last century, is perhaps the best example on how successful Asian authoritarianism can be. Based on the Lee thesis, named after Lee Kuan Yew, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, it showed that developing countries do better by choosing a strong man to lead their country rather than submitting to the capricious wishes of democratic electorate. He just made miracle, and now his son is ruling the country. It means that in democracy in Singapore, they decided that strong men should still be in charge to improve quality of life of citizens. Mainly Eurocentric studies have found that democracy is still the best, but nobody, this is a statement, nobody can resist to the point that authoritarianism works. 700 million people went out of poverty in China alone, lonely. With that, more than a billion in more authoritarian countries came to these points. In the first half of 20th century, Japan managed to make great strides under the government headed by its monarch, emperor. Both Taiwan and South Korea came to the current democratic principles long after they adopted truly democratic governance models. Look into the Gulf Arab countries, which make impressive gains without fully embracing democratic institutions, as we all know. To stimulate healthy discussion, I would like to repeat to the audience a few examples of failed democratic experiences as well. Just in one region, which is Middle East and North Africa. Few examples. Iraq, a country that has still to develop the democratic institutions. Today, there is considerable doubt that the Iraqi version of democracy will survive. It's obvious for all of us. While Iraq's sectarian divisions may be unique, democracy faces similar challenges in other Arab states. The outcome of elections that have occurred so far in Egypt should be all the evidence anyone needs that extremists can be elected into power just as easily as Democrats. A brief look at recent democratic electoral history elsewhere in the region, Lebanon, Libya, Palestine, further supports this point. There are few clear evidences that democracy can lead even to chaos. With that, I wanted to share my own experiences. Actually, I went to the politics believing that democracy is the best way. But in a fragile democracies, with not yet developed institutions, with people still have a long way to be emerged as a middle class, it's very difficult to run country on very disciplined way. The output of my own conclusion is that democracies, to show strong economic growth, should be more matured. And actually, real democracy can be sustained in a societies with emerged middle class. This is one of the semi-conclusions which I've got from my own experience. It doesn't mean that we have to rule out of democracy and appoint strong men to run the country. Now it's a difficult situation, so the country, my country, should survive this difficult situation when it's still poverty in the country and people, for example, their votes can be purchased for different reasons because they need resources, material resources, and still political culture is not strong enough to make choice based on deep thoughts about principles or individuals which run political parties. So, just to conclude, my own experience and just examples which I wanted to demonstrate it you about the core of our discussion on human rights. The following, two sets of conclusions. First, history showed that the longer a country is democratic, the more likely it is to stay that way. It's a painful situation, and in that respect, I would underline that Eurocentrism should not be dominating agenda of different discussions in different platforms. We have to look to the different cultures, think globally but act locally. And emergence of growing Asia show very interesting example of different approach, which not necessarily is bad, because this is result which is counted. Human rights as result of good economic growth significantly improved in those countries. Once democratic principles absorbed by societies, middle-class societies, it's much less likely to slide back towards authoritarianism. I'll tell you one thing, why my country would not go to authoritarianism anymore. Because we get addicted to the freedom, expression, election, other human rights which is important to explore as human beings. But the fact that country can't move too quickly in economic development, because too many talks, too many thoughts, too many debates, too many criticism, maybe strong man would do it quicker. Unfortunately, fully functional democracies usually takes decades to fully materialize, and young democracies tend to be more fragile in early years following democratic transition. And this is shortcomings which we face in early democratic states, and that is why partly the so-called Arab Spring showed that many failures followed. There's many human tragedies which followed, and some countries reversed, like Egypt, the course in order to make more predictable business environment, to attract more investors, to improve lives of people. Why Tunisia, for instance, getting better than others? Because in this country you have a bigger, stronger, more mature middle class. This is the only, so far, Arabic state, forgive me if I'm mistaken, which is moving more or less in the right direction. Why my country have some kind of choice, some type of good chances to survive? One of the answers is that we have a very educated population. This is very straightforward legacy of former Soviet Union. People can read, write, discuss things, and understanding what freedom currently is. The second set of my observations is that the greatest challenge of democracy is not only to claim, but to demonstrate that it is political system that not only show something good in history, but today, now, improves living standards, raises incomes, and reduces poverty. Democracy should show this straightforwardly. That is the only definition of success. Simple people need living standards, improvement of incomes, and reduction of poverty. My question for the discussion: does it necessarily matter how those goals is achieved? Thank you very much.